Hello and welcome to the video. In this video I'd like to take a first look at this thing here. This is the RapidFIRE goggle module from ImmersionRC. The first shipments went out the weekend. I think it's pretty much sold out already, and I managed to get my hands on one for a couple of days testing. So this video is very much a first look. I've only had it for 3 days and I don't want to present this as a review because I don't believe you can do a review in that short period of time. Once I've got a lot more hours on this thing, I'll actually do another video while I go into more depth. So this is more explaining what the module is, why it's different from traditional diversity, what I found, and some tips and tricks as well. Before we get into the nitty-gritty, I think it's worthwhile explaining what traditional diversity is so we can compare and contrast how the RapidFIRE works against those traditional systems. So traditional diversity is where you have both the antennas running all the time, and what the module is doing is trying to decide which is the best FPV signal on each of those antennas and route the best signal to the goggles. It's not just done on RSSI because one of the antennas might be picking up a very loud signal, but it might not be your FPV image. So it's typically done on not only the signal strengths, but also they're looking at things like the sync, pulse, and other things that you expect to see in a video frame. And the video frame that is the cleanest and has the best view, and best is a very subjective term here, is the one that's pumped into the goggles. RapidFIRE works in a very different way. RapidFIRE is actually listening to both the antennas all the time, and it's using the data from both the antennas to reconstruct the best possible image in your goggles. Now, ImmersionRC call this an image fusion algorithm, and there's an awful lot of processing power going on inside the RapidFIRE to give you the best possible view. So the analogy that I've come up with, and it's a bit clunky but bear with me, is imagine you had two identical magazines and you left them out on the table in the back garden, and it rained overnight and the ink was smudged in different places in both of the magazine pages. If then you came and used a traditional diversity module, what would happen is the diversity module was trying to figure out which of those pages is the least damage, and that's the one you'd see. With RapidFIRE, it actually looks at both pages and tries to overcome damage in the image using the signal from the other page and reconstruct the page as best as it possibly can, and that's what you see. So it is very, very different from the vast majority of other diversity receivers that are out there. The only other one that works in a similar way is the Clearview system. Now, Clearview is a lot more expensive, it isn't a module, and there are also some differences in the way that RapidFIRE and Clearview work. So for example, if the image is really badly corrupted from both antennas, then the way that Clearview does it, it actually redisplays the last clean image that it had, essentially introducing a 20 millisecond delay in PAL because you've seen the same frame twice. In RapidFIRE, the way it handles that is it does its best to try and recreate that image, even if it has to saturate it to black and white or display it with some noise or tearing or something in the image itself, it will still display it. So there's a slightly different way around it. The actual module itself, it's going to fit inside the goggles. It's that very bright red colour, so I'm guessing this is ImmersionRC branding here. So you're definitely not going to have to worry about whether or not people will know you have a RapidFIRE module, because they'll see you from the other side of the field. 128 by 64 OLED screen, very clear, and all the complexity that's inside the module is abstracted, so the menu is actually really easy to use. And as I'm talking, I'll kind of run through all the menu options here. There's an on-screen display that's actually shown inside the goggles. I'll show you some FPV footage in a minute. So it'll show you the band and frequency that you've got selected. So if you're trying to change things or use the buttons on top of the goggles, they still work to do the selection of the channels. The channel that you're using is shown in the goggles, and I've also been testing it showing the RSSI bars for each of the antennas as well. But that's really nice to have that data displayed internally, and you can switch that on and off. Has all of the useful bands, including an X band. That X band is just a place to store all of your favorites. So if you and your mates tend to only run a handful of frequencies between you, which is what I have with my flying buddies, you can store all of that in the X band, and by going in there you can then just use the up and down buttons on the top of the goggles, just get to the one that you are using for that particular flight. There is a spectrum analyzer inside of it. You can also fine-tune the frequencies, so if you have a video transmitter that maybe isn't completely perfect and is transmitting slightly off the band and channel that you're expecting, you can take care of that with this as well. And that kind of technology is usually only available in special versions of the firmware in things like the TrueD module. Powers up in the same mode that it was last time, which is pretty good. So when you power it down, if you have to maybe swap a battery and plug a battery back in, when you plug the battery back in, it powers up in exactly the same condition. So if you were in the middle of flight, or you've just come down, landed, and you want to swap the battery on your quad or plane or whatever and then go straight back out, then there's not a lot of fiddling about. It is a single bay installation. Now in the package itself, I've already seen it comes with the covers for both the HDO style and the Attitude V3, V4. In there is also a little ribbon cable with some stickers and an additional board as well that plugs into the head tracker port on the other side. If you're not using one of the latest goggles from Fat Shark, things like the HDOs, things like those latest Attitudes, then the bay that you install the module into can't supply all the power it needs, so you will have to install that on the other side. So if you want head tracker, then you're going to have to use something like a HDO set of goggles or one of the other Attitudes. The cable that connects the two modules together is super fine, so once you've run that across the front of your goggles, you can then cover it up with one of the supplied stickers. In practice, I've found that it's worked very well indeed. The places that I've found seem to make the most difference is when you're flying in an area with lots and lots of multipathing. Indoor tiny whoop style flying or indoor arena racing, I think that's where the RapidFIRE is really going to shine with all of the very clever technology that's hidden under the covers. Outside, flying in the field, it works very well, and it's nice to know that I'm always getting the best possible image, but it's harder in those kind of environments to see the difference between this module and the others that are on the market. I do like the fact that in the manual it does talk about long range flying, so in there it's talking about the option to disable one of the antennas and just use it as a very sensitive receiver with a nice high gain antenna, or potentially use a couple of patch or directional high gain antennas in slightly different directions. If you're going to use something like that, personally I'd recommend getting a couple of extension cables so you can have those antennas a little bit further apart. Having them close together on the goggles isn't the best idea. Having a little bit of physical separation will help you if you're going to use it like that. Only one thing I've found in the last 3 days which has caused me to scratch my head, and that is where I've been testing it with some older cameras. Now, the run cams that I've tried, all the modern run cams, all the modern Foxeers have worked beautifully. But with one camera in particular, it behaved a little bit oddly. And that was this old Ionway 700 TVL line camera that I just have plugged into a little FPV backpack that I just use for setup and testing here on the bench. And the RapidFIRE module was regularly flicking into a monochrome image rather than show color, where the other goggles with traditional diversity setups were still showing that image in glorious color. And that is because of all of the checking that that image fusion algorithm is doing. It's checking the sync, the chroma, to make sure that the image it's receiving is the best possible one, so it can figure out what it's going to use from each of the image coming in from each of the antennas to give you the best possible view. If you have a camera that maybe is a little bit fast and loose with the specs, or a video transmitter is a little bit fast and loose with the specs, then you will potentially get issues with this initial version of the RapidFIRE. But I'm guessing if you're going to be spending £150 or whatever you can get these modules for, then you're not going to be skimping on the camera and video transmitter equipment that you're going to be using anyway. But it is something to keep in mind. If you find you're having image problems with the RapidFIRE, it's probably going to be your camera or the VTX maybe wandering out of spec. And that tends to happen on the cheaper cameras where the manufacturer will maybe skimp on a capacitor to save a couple of cents, but it means that the way that maybe part of the image or the frame is encoded isn't exactly compliant, 100% compliant with the PAL or NTSC standards. The other nice thing about this is it does have a USB port, so there is going to be firmware updates available as we all get our hands on this and start to use it. I think that there are going to be firmware changes to tweak and further improve the way the algorithm works, but also the way some of the features do too. I'm not a big fan of these big bars along the top of the FPV image. I would like to know what the RSSI signal strength is on my antennas, but I don't want to sacrifice the entire top row of my FPV image in order to see that data. Similarly, inside the module, there's a 3-axis sensor, which could be used for lots of different things. At the moment, ImmersionRC on their Facebook pages are asking for people for ideas. The one that I fed back was it needs to detect when the goggles have been left still with the lenses facing into the sky to help protect the goggles from getting burnt by the sun. And so maybe kind of almost like an inactivity alarm when it's in that position. I do like the fact there's that interaction with the community, and the fact there's a service centre here in the UK and one in the USA hopefully means that if you do have a problem with your module, you can get it fixed quite quickly. And that again is very different from a lot of the modules coming from Chinese vendors. Last couple of things to think about. It is very, very red. I really hope they come out with a version that is black or grey that will look a little bit less shouty. Hopefully once the marketing branding people at ImmersionRC feel that the RapidFIRE is established, we'll be able to get those options. This module here that I'm looking at the moment is not one I can keep. I need to send this on to another reviewer. Otherwise, I'd probably drag it into the garage and probably spray it up a nice white colour so that it doesn't look as wacky on my goggles. And the last point to consider, of course, is that it is quite expensive, but then it is doing something that no other diversity system will do. If you're a pilot that's flying in the open air and want the best possible image, then this is definitely something to look at. But if you're a pilot that's running indoors in areas with lots and lots of multipathing, or you're racing, or maybe you're a tiny whoop indoor flyer and you want to get rid of the majority of the breakup due to all of the signals bouncing around from all the hard surfaces where you're flying, then this is going to make a massive difference. So stay tuned for when I get another one of these and I can put a lot more hours on it, and I can do a much more in-depth video and show you a little bit more detail. If you found that video useful or like the content, then please hit the like and subscribe button down below. If you want to go the extra step, you can become a Patreon of the Painless 360 channel and help provide support for what I do here. All the videos created here are put into playlists, so if you're interested in a particular topic, have a look at the playlist, and they all are organised in there to make them easier to use. If you're not sure if there's a video for your particular problem or topic you want to know more about, then add Painless 360 to the Google search term that you're interested in, and that should find the video, article or content about the particular thing that you're interested in having a look at.